Right, I've come out in the woods today to practice a bit of rope work, a bit of knot tying and setting up a tarp. So I brought with me not quite my sum total of cordage and a tarp, and I'm just going to go through the basics or teach myself to set up the tarp, so when in 2 or 3 months time I go down south camping with some good friends, I at least look as though I know what I'm doing. I don't want to cut any of this rope, especially this, which isn't climbing rope, it's more walking rope, but it's had very little use and I don't want to cut it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a ridge line between two trees, and I'm going to use this fairly thick rope to do it with. So I'll just get it paid out between the two trees. In fact, this is the area I've selected for the exercise. It's flat. There's a deciduous tree centre shot there, and then as we pan round there's a silver birch. Not terribly substantial, but it'll do for this project there. So I'm going to start on the silver birch end, because what I've done, that rope is far longer than I need. So what I've done is I've put the end of the rope at that deciduous with a little bit of slack just to work with, and then I've got most of the slack at this end here. Well, I can do away with a lot of that slack with one knot I'm familiar with, and that's the Siberian hitch. I'm going to wrap a loop around the tree like that. I'm going to put both pieces of rope over the palm of my hand. I'm going to form a loop in the working end, take that loop over the standing end, put half a more turn in it by just twisting my hand and shoving a bite of the working end through that loop, cinch it all up, and that's effectively a slip knot that I can move up and down the tree, and I can cinch up fairly tight. Now, to release this knot, I just pull on the end that is the working end coming out of that loop. If I pull on that, give it a pull, the whole lot will come to bits. So I'll just put that on one more time. And I'm just going to tie it off. I could put a bit of stick through that loop and pull it up, just to make sure it doesn't come undone accidentally. Anyway, that's one end secured. So I'll just go over now to the other end. Yeah, we might take that branch off, it's dead. Right, what knot am I going to secure on here? because I want this rope fairly tight, and it is a fairly springy rope. The knot I'm going to put on here is a trucker's hitch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to slacken the rope, turn that away from me, take the end that's nearest the working end and form a loop. Put the working end through the loop. And then I can pull on that. And I've got some mechanical advantage. And I can get that rope fairly taut. Now I could, to tie it off, I'm just going to pinch it here. In fact, I'm going to wrap it around one more time because I can't. I've got plenty of rope to use up, and it's under so much tension. Pinching it doesn't really help me that much. Alright, now we're in business. So now I'll just tie 2 half hitches around there. Two half hitches. So that isn't going anywhere. So what I've done is I've tied a Siberian hitch at that end. And then I've, at the other end, at this end, I've used the mechanical advantage that a trucker's hitch gives you to really tighten that line up, and I've tied that off with 2 half hitches. So now let's see if the tarp fits. It's a green rope against a green background with a green tarp. It's not very good for you seeing stuff, is it? That's a piece of skipping line. I don't know what that's off. Oh, the tarp's inside yet. We'll have to start again. Right, so now we have to secure the tarp onto the ridge line. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to make 2 loops. Now, I could tie this with a reef knot, or you Americans will call it a square knot. And in this instance, I think that'll do. So I can tie the tarp onto the ridge line by using a loop I've just made. Put a simple lark's foot on it so it's hanging on the ridge line there. And then just pass this round. Two more times. That'll do. Press it up a bit. So that knot will slide up and down there until I cinch it up and put some sideways tension on it. And then it isn't going anywhere, it's not moving. So now I've got the trouble of attaching it to this though. So I could go up there, I could put a stick in it, couldn't I? Fairly big stick. There we go. So that won't move now. So we'll do the same at the other end. Actually, it'll be all right. That's come out because it's not. What I'm going to do. I'll put a lark's foot around the stick. That'll be a bit better. It'll be all right when it's cinched up on both ends. Right, we'll go to the other end. I did have another bit of string. What did I do with it? Watch out. It's around my neck. Right, we tied a reef knot in that other one. A reef knot's okay for this, and it's fairly grippy string or grippy bootlace or whatever it is. But if I wanted something more substantial, I'd do a double fisherman's. So I've just done a quick double fisherman's in that one. Same again. We'll get that knot out of the way. So we've put a lark's foot on it. Put it on with a lark's foot. That's just put it on with the lark's foot. We just wrap the loop around and pass the loop through itself, and that's a lark's foot. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the big long dangly end and wrap it round a couple more times towards the centre. And then just get it to lay right so all the coils are not crossed over. That's it there. That's our loop end. We've got the knot in the way a little bit there. It'll be alright. So what I'm going to do again is another stick. So now those two prusik loops are working against each other and pulling this tight. So now all I've got to think about is guying the corners of the tarp out. I have got plenty of cordage, but I just don't like cutting it. So, and the other thing we use a lot of when we're away camping is this plastic stuff, which doesn't hold knots so well because it's a fairly rigid plastic, and also as well when you twist it, it can kink and unwind. So it's not, you got to think about the sort of knots you're putting in the types of rope you've got. So I'm going to tie I could tie a clovage is probably as good as anything. And then just finish. This rope comes undone as easy as well when it's been flapped about. It doesn't grip itself, so you need to, a clove hitch on there on its own would probably over time work loose, so you just need to, I'll just put 2 half hitches on. That'll do for now, and then we'll get a peg in the ground. Right. Try and keep all my gear together. I haven't got much, I don't want to lose what I've got. I've got these little daft tent pegs, so they're not going to work very well in this ground at all. If I had time I could make some tent pegs out of bits of tree, but I'm just going to do with these for now. Elastic bands are incredibly good for starting fires with. Get your campfire going. Okay, so I've just found out we missed a big chunk of recording there, so I'm going to have to go through these tent stakes again. Right. What we're doing now is we're tying the corners of the, or we're guying the corners of the tarpaulin down to make a tent-like structure. So again, just using my odds and sods of rope, and this happens to be a piece of skipping rope, I'm just attaching it to the grommets with a clove hitch. And this is a much nicer rope to work with than that blue plastic stuff, but I'll still put 2 half hitches in just to finish it off. And then we'll come down to the tent pegs. Now I've got these tiny skinny tent pegs, but we can make them do by using 2 of them. angling the tent pegs towards the tarp and putting 2 in crisscrossed. Just a bit of tree root there. And then hook the guy line around both of them, and I'm going to use a trucker's hitch again. So I need a loop in this end here. And you've got to make your, when you put a loop in it, you've got to make the end, the working end, go through the loop that you make from the working end. So I'll put that loop through there. And don't cinch it up too tight, because it'll just pull your tent peg down. So I'm just going to put a half hitch on there, which is on the bite, so I can pull it straight out. Half hitch. We've got plenty of loop. I'll put another half hitch in it, and that's the corner done. And I'll do the same for all 4 corners. Okay, for this 4th and last corner, I'm going to do a different type of knot. On the other 3 corners I've done trucker's hitches, which are fairly simple to do and work on almost any type of rope, including this blue poly rope, which we always have a lot of when we go camping because it's cheap. But with paracord you can get away with a hitch called a Taut-Line hitch. The problem with the Taut-Line hitch is there's 3 versions of it, and I think it's the midshipman's version that's probably the best. So I'm going to try and tie the midshipman's version. And I've just taken the rope from the corner around the pegs. So that's my standing end, this is my working end here, and I'm just going to throw the working end over there, and I'm going to make a loop around the standing end, and then I'm going to make another loop, but I've got to make sure that this second loop comes up close, comes up on the high side. So this second loop has come up on the high side. So the first loop is that loop there. You won't see it well, but I'll demonstrate it later on with a bit of cord. And then the second loop is inside, and then I can finish it off with another loop in the same direction. I'll put this loop on the bite so I can undo it. Cinch the whole thing up, and then this knot, you can ride this knot up the line to tighten that corner, and there's enough friction in that knot when it's under tension that it won't slacken off. So unlike the trucker's hitch, where you set the tension and that's it, if you want to readjust the tension you've got to loosen the knot off, and then it's simple enough, but you've got to loosen your half hitch off and re-tension. On this one you can tension it on the fly. You can just take your knot, pull it down. There, I've taken all the tension off, things slack, or I can tension it up, and there you go. And that should stay like that. So that's the midshipman's version of the Taut-Line hitch. So that's basically what I wanted to do today, was just come out, set up a tarp with the ridge line, attach the tarp to the ridge line and just guy the tarp out, because that's the sort of thing we'll be doing in a couple of months' time when we go down for the big camp, and I don't want to look a prat. So I'll practice a couple more times. I'll go through some of these knots myself, because these knots are not ingrained in my head. So I just want to know a few knots that I can tie straight off without having to think about them, and also as well, when you see them, to know what they look like. And I'm not at that stage yet, but I will try and get to that stage, and not only be able to tie them, but also be able to know that when it comes to release them, that you can get them undone without having to cut all your cordage up. So I've learned something. I hope you've learned something. So that tarp could obviously be lower down to form a tent, or higher up if you were using a hammock. If it's going to be windy, it's probably a good idea putting a few bungees in the system. There is a lot of wind loading on it at the moment, and cheap tarps won't stand up to much, but cheap tarps are cheap, and if you're going to have a fire, you stand a good chance of getting burn holes in. That thing's going to take off in a minute. Before you clear off, just have a quick look round. Make sure you haven't left anything behind. Right, I've got back home and I've had a count up at the amount of hitches and knots we used to set that ridge line and tarp up, and amazingly it comes to 9. We used the lark's foot, the reef knot, the clove hitch, the Siberian hitch, the trucker's hitch, the Taut-Line hitch, the prusik knot, the double fisherman's knot, and the half hitch. I think if we added 3 more to that, the bowline, the timber hitch and the figure of 8, we wouldn't really be stuck for knots. There's just one I'd like to go over, and that's the Taut-Line hitch. I had a bit of difficulty explaining that. Not that the project was about explaining knots, but I did say I would go through it, so I'm going to go through it one more time. I've set up a rig here. If we imagine this is the tarpaulin, and that's the eye in the tarpaulin. So we've got the guy line coming down, and I've got 2 tent pegs in the grass here, so we're just going to go around that. Now if I were to tie a standard Taut-Line hitch, or the one most presented on the videos or instructions, I would simply take the running line, the working end, go behind the standing end and make a loop, continue around and make 2 loops, and then come up and go around the back of this standing end and form 1 more loop, cinch it up, and there's me Taut-Line hitch, which I can use to tension this line, and on the fly I can adjust the tension, and that works perfectly well. But under a lot of tension it can slip. Probably not enough tension before the tent pegs fall out, but under a lot of tension it can slip. So what's preferred is the midshipman's version, which is almost exactly the same. You start off exactly the same. You take the working end behind the standing end, you form a loop, but instead of forming your next loop down, you form it above the first loop, so the 2 loops actually cross over, so you get a cross in the loops, and then it's exactly the same as before. So that's the version I'll try and do when I do the Taut-Line hitch. It probably puts a bit more of a kink in the line, and it just grips to the line a bit more. So that's all I wanted to finish off with. So that's it for now, and hopefully I'll see you again in a week or so.